Hey there, and welcome to Friends Along the Way, a podcast where travel meets the stories and people who stay with us long after the trip ends. I'm Bethany, and in each episode, I'm going to sit down with a friend to share adventures, lessons, and those unexpected moments that turn strangers into friends. So grab your coffee or your boarding pass, and let's go on this adventure together. Welcome back to Friends Along the Way. On today's episode, we are heading from Austria to Germany. So, an hour and a half away from Austria is Germany, Salzburg, to one of my favorite cities, Munich, also known as München. This city has so much history, from the historical city squares to powerful memorials to the legendary beer halls, and of course, the infamous Oktoberfest. Munich gave me so many stories, and I can't wait to share them with you, so let's dive right in. So, we wrapped up our time in Austria, we left Salzburg in the morning, and then we crossed over into Germany. It's only that hour and a half, so not too long. And when we got into Munich, we got in before lunch. It really didn't take that much time. So our very first stop was Marienplatz, which is the heart of Munich's old town. A few fun facts about Marienplatz. It's been Munich's main square since 1158. Basically, from the moment the city really started growing. The name comes from the Mariensaal. I think I said that incorrectly, but whatever. Or Mary's column. And Mary's column is this tall column, obviously, topped with a golden statue of the Virgin Mary. That was built in 1638 to celebrate Munich being spared during the 30 Years' War. And so Marienplatz is actually considered ground zero for Munich. But the city distances are measured from that exact point. At Marienplatz, we also watched the Glockenspiel in the new town hall tower. It's basically like this mechanical clock performance that reenacts little scenes from Bavarian history, like a royal wedding, a joust, the Cooper's dance. It was about like 5 minutes long, and it plays several times a day when it's the warmer months. I would say, is it life changing? No. Is it cute? Yes. If you catch it, you catch it type of thing. If you miss it, you'll definitely live. Okay, there's a lot more to see than just the little Glockenspiel. So, about Munich. In German, it's called München, like I said previously. Munich is the capital and most populous city of Bavaria, the third largest city in Germany after Berlin and Hamburg. The name München comes from an old term meaning monk's place, referring to Benedict monks who lived there in the 8th century. Munich really took off when Duke Henry the Lion granted the monks market rights. That's when the city's history as a trading center really began. Today, it's known for its arts, architecture, science, industry, and a very high quality of life. And the beer culture and festivals like Oktoberfest are world famous and deeply tied to the Bavarian identity. Once we got to Marienplatz, we had some free time. We walked around, shopped, grabbed lunch, and that's when I had my very first German beer. I was going to say my very first beer, and I'm like, no, that is wrong. My very first German beer in Germany. And it was everything that you would want out of a German beer. The smoothness, richness, just an absolute chef's kiss, in all honesty. When I was walking around, I also went to a store, as we know in the United States, as TJ Maxx, but they have it as TK Maxx. So just a little bit of difference in the name, but all the stuff is the exact same. But I still had to stop in. And when we went to lunch, my uh my waiter's name was Olaf, and I could not stop thinking of Frozen. Oh yeah, good times, good times. But later we met up with our tour guide Sarah, who took us around the city and into one of the most famous beer halls in the Marienplatz area. I fell in love with Munich's beer halls just because they reminded me so much of the breweries back home in Wisconsin. The huge wooden tables, the steins, the hearty food. I know in Wisconsin we have cheese curds. They did not sell cheese curds here, so I was a little bit disappointed. And it was just that cozy communal feeling. So if you go, my favorite brewery is Lakefront Brewery in Milwaukee, and they have these huge wooden tables, and anybody can sit there. You kind of just plop down, other people can plop down next to you just because they're so big that you can have multiple parties at one table. And so this whole experience of the tables, the steins, just everything about the beer halls reminded me of home in Milwaukee, but in Europe. And it was so good. I fell in love with Munich, in all honesty. So we really just went around Marienplatz, got the tour, learned a bunch of stuff. The beer was one of my favorites just because I do love drinking beer and trying new beer. But after that, we went and headed over to our hostel, which was kind of in the more modern neighborhood outside of the old town. I think it was in Auhauthausen. I think that is how you say it. Or an area similar to that. So it felt more like the everyday kind of Munich offices, apartments, shops, like less historic and more livable type of area. When we got there, my friend Michelle and I walked around. She really wanted to go to the Ferris wheel that was right outside of our hostel, basically. I think you paid maybe like €5. So she went and did that while I kind of wandered around. I probably called my mom or my aunt and was just taking a pause to talk to them about everything. After I was on the phone and Michelle was done, we went and grabbed Mexican food that night at a restaurant close by to the hostel. And as somebody who lives in Phoenix, I'm just going to say it was mid Mexican food. It wasn't terrible. Like, it wasn't Midwestern tacos that your mom made from the kit, but it wasn't like the really good, authentic Mexican food that you can get in the southern states of the United States or even Mexico. So Michelle went back into the room. We were actually roommates. It was great. I went to the hostel bar, and usually there's a bar at every hostel that I've been to, which is really nice. And you can just sit there, meet some new people from across the world, whatever. Everybody, because they were there for Oktoberfest, were in their drindles and their lederhosen. And I actually ran into a guy that I saw in the elevator earlier that day. He sat down at the opposite side of the bar, picked up my beer, and I'm like, "Hi, I remember you from the elevator. I'm going to sit down and I need a friend." And he's like, "Oh, okay, cool." But it was really good to get to know him. He's in the pharmaceutical portion of healthcare back in the US. And we really got into this whole conversation about healthcare, how broken our healthcare system actually is. I talked to him about how I don't like big pharma. He's like, I don't work for big pharma, blah, 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 blah. But it was a very good conversation. I guess he's one of the good ones in pharmaceuticals. I guess I can say that. But him and his friends actually travel around and visit different breweries and rate the beers. And they have this Instagram account. So it's three of them running this Instagram account and just trying beers in different places. So I'm like, that's super cool. And yeah, just the typical classic hostel night where you end up talking to strangers, learning more things about travel and getting to know new people. Then after that, the next day, I'm going to skip over the morning because I want to talk about that a little bit later. But I went to Oktoberfest and oh my gosh, I liked it. I liked it a lot. But first, before we get into the stories, let me tell you some fun facts. Oktoberfest is the world's largest beer festival, which you're probably already thinking, duh, we know that. But this place is huge. It started in 1810 as a celebration of the wedding of Crown Prince Ludwig and Princess Therese. It's held on a huge field called Theresenwiese or Therese's Meadow. Even though it's called Oktoberfest, it mostly runs from late September to early October. So it's not all in October. And this lasts about 16 to 18 days. Days straight. Even on weekdays, people take off. People come from all over the world. It literally draws millions of visitors every single year. And they estimate about 6 to 7 million, which is crazy. The only beer that they have at Oktoberfest is beer that's brewed within Munich city limits. So it's all local, which is super cool. And it's offered all in the tents. When I first walked in, I kind of thought that it looks like the state fair, if you've ever been to one. And it really made me feel like I was in Wisconsin. I was walking in while this guy was walking out and threw up behind me, and I'm like, oh, just another day at the Wisconsin State Fair. But we were in Munich. So I'm like, this is normal to me. There were rides like you would see at a carnival or the state fair. They had their food stalls, games. So you had a lot more to do there other than drink. But then when you see these so called tents that they're talking about, these beer tents, they are not tents. They're massive structures, like full on buildings. So, the buildings that you go into to see the cute little barn animals? It's buildings like those that are just huge. It's crazy. And then on the outside, there are more tables, like those long wooden tables, and everybody just sits there and drinks. You don't have to leave the tent to go get food. You can order food there. Depending on the day, the time, all of that, you could either get in fast or you wait in line forever. But once you finally get inside, again, you sit at the family style wooden tables And usually there's another group that you don't know sitting beside you. And I was in a group of girls, and we ended up sitting with a bunch of Italian guys from like the Milan area. We were also told that Northern Italian men or people are different than Southern Italian men slash people, but they were all super nice. They were hilarious, very Italian. This one guy was trying to propose to one of the girls in the group, and she's like, "No, I have a boyfriend." And he was being so over dramatic, like in the best Italian way. And he's like, "My heart is broken. Oh my gosh." And I'm like, "Oh, good God. This is amazing. I love watching this stuff." But basically, everybody was in Lederhosen or their drindles, including the servers. And if you ever think of Oktoberfest, you might think of those waiters and waitresses that can really carry all those beer steins and all those food plates. And you're probably like, that is impossible. Oh no, they are carrying those steins, like 8 to 10 of them at a time. And then all these, wow, not together. And then they're also carrying all these plates stacked up on their arms like it's literally nothing. The beer steins, being from Wisconsin, I thought I was going to be great. I'm like, oh, I've had a beer stein. These things are frickin' ginormous. Like classic 1 liter mugs. And mine was, I think one of them was around 15 euros, which is actually pretty reasonable for the amount that you get. Like 15 euros for a liter mug, that's a steal, kind of. That's not bad. We, our little group made friends from all over. Some Americans that were stationed in Munich, that were in the military, the Italians at our table, people from different parts of Europe. The vibe was just basically anything goes and everyone is your friend, which I love. I love that whole communal aspect. I was trying to get a picture of the waitress, like with all the food on her arms, and this guy comes, takes my phone, and he's like, "I'll get a picture for you," and takes a picture, but he gets himself in the picture, like he's taking a selfie with all his food. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he has his like little lederhosen on, the hat, all of it. So it's all in good fun. It was a really good time. Next time, because I know that for sure there's going to be a next time, I want to invest in a drindle. I want to go with my own group of friends and stay a little bit longer. I usually have an easier time drinking with friends than being with non friends, even though I've known these people for a couple of days now. I just don't feel comfortable really allowing myself to be in a foreign country and like really let loose. If, yeah, I'm a little bit, I wouldn't say controlling in that way, but I'm a little bit guarded just because I want to make sure that I am going to be safe and I'm going to be alive. But I don't really think anything bad would happen in Munich. I felt very safe there. And then next, I know we have to get past Oktoberfest. I could probably talk about it forever, but we got to go on to the next part of the journey, friends. My last big Bavarian stop was the Neuschw- Neuschwanstein Castle. There we go. It is one of the most photographed castles in all of Europe. And this is when we were actually like leaving Munich. So it was outside of Munich. And you need to go because you will see why it is the most photographed castle in all of Europe. It is huge. It's so pretty. It was built in the late 1800s for King Ludwig II of Bavaria. It was designed as this romantic fairy tale style retreat, not really like a military castle, which that's kind of what I experienced back in Salzburg because it was a fortress. So that was more of like a castle, but military. It looks medieval, but it's actually relatively modern and was never fully completed before Ludwig's death. It still actually is not furnished, so we didn't go inside. This castle is so famous that it inspired Walt Disney's castle designs. So when you see the castle in the beginning of a Disney movie and it makes the sound. I'm not going to try and do it because I forgot what it is, but you know the Disney sound, okay? And then the little, like, star goes across, like, it's kind of like a rainbow type thing. You guys know what I'm talking about, okay? Don't act like you don't. That was all inspired by this castle. It draws nearly over 100 million, nearly over 1 million visitors a year. And it has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So it is very, very important. We didn't go inside because it's not fully furnished. And I know that they do tours, but honestly, we were told by our tour guide that it's not worth it to go in there just because nothing's really done. So you're not going to see anything. But we did walk up, took pictures of the views, got a group photo, and I left thinking that I need to visit a couple more castles in my lifetime because one like that is just not enough for me. And I might become a princess. So if there are any princes out there looking for a wife, hit me up. I am here. I am here. But I wanted to save this last little portion that wasn't in chronological order with how I usually do my podcasts and talk about my adventures. I like to make sure everything is in order because it just helps me kind of relive it and just kind of go through the motions again and make sure I get everything out and remember everything. This part is also a little bit more heavy, and I intentionally did this because I don't want to go from, oh, Germany is great, and then this part and being like, oh, okay, kind of heavy, and then trying to get back into like this happiness mode because what I want to talk about is Dachau, which is a very serious thing. If you don't know, Dachau is a concentration camp. It was the first Nazi concentration camp. It opened on March 22nd of 1933, just a few weeks after Hitler came into power, and it became the model for the entire concentration camp system and training ground for the SS. So from 1933 to 1945, hundreds of thousands of people were imprisoned there. Whether they were political opponents, the Jews, obviously, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, and many others that the Nazi regime, labeled as undesirable. It was liberated by American forces on April 29th, 1945, and today it operates as a memorial and a museum. Those are the facts, and I'm going to give you more facts, but it's what I learned through this entire thing. It was about a 4-hour tour. It was a long tour. And I learned a lot, but I was exhausted. And I did a lot of zoning in and out. And it was basically pure mental overload. There was no disrespect in anything. Still listened, still paid attention as much as I could without like kind of zoning out. It it was just really heavy, and I don't really think I grasped everything until I left. And sometimes when it comes to stuff like this, heavy situations like this, it does take me a little bit to process and really understand what just happened, what I learned, and how I feel about the situation. Going in, we saw sculptures of prisoners hunched over, shoulders rolled forward, and like heads down because at Dachau, prisoners weren't allowed to look at guards in the eyes and they just kept their heads down, their backs bent, and over time, that posture became their reality. They were unfortunately like little hunchbacks. We learned about their food situation and how their soup would start out as regular soup, then it just became broth, and it eventually just became water that they were supposed to be eating. Their so called coffee that they were given eventually turned into wood shavings in hot liquid. And so these tiny rations and basically everything being water, and there's no hardiness to anything, and wood shavings, they were not enough to keep anyone healthy. So, other than being hunchback, they're not healthy. This statue that I saw resembled these people, and they were just so small. They were so tiny. There was no meat on their bones. They looked skeletal. It was really sad. Like, it was just horrible to see. We saw how they categorized the prisoners with symbols on their clothing. So it's not just numbers that they tattooed on their arms or numbers that they gave for their clothing, but it was triangles, shapes, these different indicators to tell the soldiers whether someone was Jewish, a political prisoner, homosexual, etc. Everything about them was stripped away. Their humanity was stripped away, and they were just turned into labels. And they were only seen as labels and numbers. We then went into barracks, which were built for a lot fewer prisoners than what they actually held. So these bunk beds had multiple levels, 4 levels, and the elderly, sick, and children were supposed to be on the first level, and those who were healthy, in good shape, they went on the higher levels. But as time went on and the nutrition was depleted, everybody lived on that first level of the bunks. And these people couldn't even climb high because, of course, they were weak, but they were physically deformed because of their hunchback. So it was hard for them to like go up and get into a different level of the bunks. And so these bunks, they're all cramped together on hardwood, no mattresses. And on top of the physical suffering, There was constant psychological torture. This place, they had to endure psychological warfare every single day. Guards would forbid the prisoners from stepping onto the grass and then deliberately throw something on the grass in order them to go get it. So if they obeyed and went on the grass, they risked being shot for breaking the rule. But if they didn't go on the grass and they didn't obey, they would be shot for disobedience. And so it was a constant sick game of fear and impossible choices that these people had to endure every single day. We saw the crematorium area, and I think that was probably the most horrible part. We got there, and our tour guide told us that they weren't allowed to go in to to this crematorium area, like the gas chamber and everything that he brought us to with the groups, because they want each person to walk through on their own in silence and the process and be able to process this in their own way. Some people actually choose to stay outside, and that's okay too. It's not bad if you don't go in. I don't want you to ever think that. It's really just the way that you choose to process this, what you want to see, and what you can kind of deal with. So I personally went in, and first there's a room where the people are brought in, being processed. They go to the next room and they're told to undress. These people were told that they were going to take a shower, like a communal shower, which wasn't unusual because mass showers did happen. But once they were led into the shower room, the shower heads were actually a part of the gas system. So they were being gassed in, and all of it would come through the shower heads. After the gassing, the bodies were moved into the oven portion of the crematorium. So we saw a crematorium, but then the gassing area and this whole other part, the ovens were bigger. And the gas chamber at Dachau is a complicated topic historically because there's debate about the extent of its use. But whether it was used as a fully industrialized killing center or prepared for that, the intent behind it was clear, and that was to make mass murder easier on the perpetrators and make the system more efficient. So basically, they had this whole crematorium gas chamber system, and they thought about it because the higher ups for the guards are like, this is really taking a toll on our guards for killing people. We need to help them with basically their mental health so that they don't feel like they're constantly killing people, but put it in a way where their hands aren't really getting dirty. And that's how this whole chamber system came to be. What struck me the most was the idea that these people weren't just physically destroyed, they were mentally and emotionally broken down, stripped of dignity, starved, terrorized, and forced to watch each other die. And many of them didn't even speak German. Some were Polish, Russian, from all over Europe, and they couldn't even fully understand what was happening around them. And on top of this confusion because of languages and just seeing people shot, I can't even imagine the horror that they saw every single day and that actually happened. Because you're there and you're with all these people, and the barracks were there was women and then there were men. Okay, they were separated, but all of these people sleeping on like one bunk, sharing, just way too many people. There were supposed to be 7,000 people there, and he said that there were like around 32,000. That's insane. Just insane. And so, on top of making sure that you're getting your chores done, you have to keep your place spotless, your barrack spotless. And it's like, how can you do that with all these people in the same barrack? It was absolutely insane. And these people were stripped away from everything, their dignity, who they were. They weren't even seen as human. And the guards would make fun of them and basically dangle things in their face. So there's like a sentence on one of the walls talking about smoking a cigarette. And in Europe, people love to smoke. You'll see it everywhere that you go. And smoking was like their last bit of humanization. It was their last little bit of peace and normalcy. And so when the cigarettes were taken away, this little guilty pleasure type thing, and then there are guards that are basically shoving it in their face, signs, putting it in their face, and they are just they're just being tortured in so many ways. And what happened at Dachau in all the camps is one of the reasons the Holocaust stands out in history. It wasn't just this mass murder, it was systematic, industrialized, and ideologically driven. It was about wanting to annihilate entire groups of people. And so Germany now does not glorify this. They don't plaster Hitler's name everywhere. Kids are raised to feel responsibility and remorse for what happened and to understand why it must never happen again. The memorials are quiet, honest, and a little bit uncomfortable, as they should be. Because if you go anywhere in Germany, you really should go to a concentration camp. It is such a big part of history, but let me tell you, it's going to be uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me because that's a lot to process. That's a lot to really think about. And I'm not encouraging you to go visit Dachau because I want you to go visit like dark tourism. But it's really to learn, remember, and to honor the victims. And from here, please keep learning. The little bit that we're taught in school barely scratches the surface. And I think we all just need to dig a little bit deeper because in our history books, I did not understand the absolute turmoil that these people went through. Yeah, we read books about putting the Jews in closets and hiding them, but I don't really think we can understand as children um, what this actually means. and what these people are enduring and trying to stay away from. So go learn some more, do some more digging, and I highly encourage you to go to these places that make you feel uncomfortable so that you can understand, learn, and grow from them. But with that, that was basically my time in and around Munich. I started from this historic heart of Marienplatz, going to the cozy beer halls that reminded me of home, the craziness of Oktoberfest, the fairy tale magic of Neuschwanstein, and finally to the haunting reality of Dachau. Munich, München, Bavaria as a whole will forever stay with me. And I personally think that Germany is so underrated. I know people, and even I was like this. I wanted to rush to London, Paris, Rome, those cities that we see on TV and in movies and wherever. Those that are highly, highly idealized in our minds. But don't sleep on Germany. It's beautiful and full of stories that you will carry with you forever. Thank you so much for listening to today. Next week, we're going to dive into our last two countries of Switzerland and Liechtenstein. So stay tuned for that. And thank you for always listening, sharing, and all of that with your friends and listening to friends along the way. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining me on this leg of the journey. If today's story made you smile, think, or dream a little bigger, share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. You can find more travel moments and behind the scenes stories on Instagram at Friends Along the Way Pod. Until next time, safe travels, say yes, book the ticket, and keep making friends along the way.